It's about a mother and her son, a young mother who's somewhat emotionally fragile. She has a 13-year-old son, and she has a husband who's a criminal, and he's not always there. He comes and goes when he pleases. Sometimes he's there and sometimes he isn't. And, through a series of events, eventually she meets another man, and things result from that, and he shows up for a couple of weeks and utilizes the boy and puts him to work stealing for him, and the kid doesn't really want to do it, but he does it. Had to explain this many times in the States, to the point where I now basically repudiate it. I don't want to have to argue about it, because other people will say noir doesn't have to end tragically, it just have to have a certain mood to it. A lot of people think noir is primarily an atmospheric quality, not really a philosophical requirement to it. The term, it's not completely, the way I used it, it's not inaccurate to what I do. Some dark stories set in a rural environment. I wasn't trying to mimic the atmosphere of film noir, because it's usually kind of seedy in a glamorous way. I was doing something else, but I wanted to have when I studied noir in a textbook situation, we took it back to Greek theater and brought it all the way up, a 5-part structure, and it had to end tragically and all this, and so I was simply more or less just thinking about the Greek roots of noir more than I was the film noir attributes. I do make a lot of notes in between books that may not ever go anywhere, but I see something and it causes a thought, and I write them all down. I might have 100 notebooks. I mean, I'm not being facetious. It might be that many. Once I'm engaged in a book, I keep a notepad with me everywhere, because you never know when it. And if you don't get the wording just right and try to do it in the morning, you can't remember. I had it perfect in my mind last night, and so I do that. And I often, once I have a sense of who's involved, I will sit and just often put music on and just imagine conversations between characters who've already begun to spring to life, that kind of thing. And in terms of the language, I read a lot of poetry, and I have for many years. And once I got introduced to poetry in a serious way, I came to appreciate it. I laughed at it before when I was a young man on poetry. I do, and it's a constant subject between my wife and I about whether it would be beneficial to go somewhere for a month, a year, or permanently, or whether, on balance, the remoteness has been good for me. It's hard to say. I don't like to argue about literary theory and stuff, and I don't necessarily have to hear every new theory. We moved there with the idea that I would focus on doing my approach. On the other hand, it's quiet and it's very easy to live there, and you know, it's really a complicated thing. Also, with other writers, if you really have a rapport with someone, that's great. If you're kind of competitive with each other and all that, not so great. And if I go to a big environment, I've lived in environments full of writers before, and I know you're going to get some of both. And I don't want to waste a lot of energy on the politics of being a writer. I know I can get sidetracked on these little interpersonal things. The neighborhood I live in has, 30–35% unemployment probably. A lot of people have long quit looking for full-time employment and just begin to look for things they can do to fill in. The cost of living is much more inexpensive there, and that's why people can survive like that. But throughout the state and everything, as I've been discovering in the last several months, people are really angry this time. I've heard more anger coming from people about the political system and the political situation than I've heard in a long time. Partly having to do with the bankers on Wall Street, in essence, not being punished whatsoever for a huge debacle that they, I'm not going to say they rigged it, but they were involved in, and there seemed to be no consequences other than they have more money to count. Make sure you're doing what you want to do. I get asked by young writers all the time, say, make sure you love what you're doing. I mean, and write the book you want to write, because sometimes the joy of doing the book might be all you're going to get out of it in a worldly sense. And also, if you're not really deeply engaged with what you're attacking, there's a level of free zone, you know, between the artist and the material and the page. It won't happen. It won't. It only really happens if you can allow yourself to hang it all out there and be fully engaged with it.